cappuccino.
You probably need to.
Yeah.
Especially since you could all just run out after the debate and we look at cards. I don't know what time this is.
Fine.
Oh, I need the speakers loose. Thank you. I'm not a blank document. Are you done judging now? You want any more around? What is it
pull up the new saver.
What is it called?
That's not correct. It should just be resaved just once
It's
you
on
highlight
a
it.
blank document.
Again?
It's a blank document.
No.
Oh, that's why. My
What?
word apparently crashes.
Okay, I got it.
What do you mean your word crashed?
Let's go
It
right
like
here.
crashed.
Okay. That's right. We have the speakers.
This is yours, right?
What?
Just charge it.
Yeah.
What's the cake good, Austin?
It's okay.
That's disappointing.
My word just like that. Just crashed.
I need the aux cable too.
It is not giving me the opportunity to like open the files either. It's crazy.
What is wrong with you?
Huh? Probably. Because that hasn't been happening anyway. So. You won't even let me access like. But I don't know what it was.
Oh, it should be signed. Y'all don't have a stand, right?
No, I'm afraid not.
Why is that fun? Alright, cool.
Oh, let me open the audio clip. That would be a good start. Timer.
I don't have it. Do you know, can you see if you can see if the email's right?
Yeah.
Let me see. Okay. I don't know what's going on.
Is your Wi-Fi cut out?
No, it should be fine. Yeah.
What? It's weird.
Do you want to just try re-forwarding it to me?
Yeah.
You don't have to add everything. Just
Okay.
forward it to me. Okay.
Got it?
Yeah, it's on. Alright. So I'll set a time when the audio clip starts.
Kim Gaddy, Chair of the City of Newark's Environmental Commission, and I stand here representing my 3 children who are asthmatic. And the Environmental Commission, 2 of the goals that we are set forth in our Sustainability Action Plan for the City of Newark deals with asthma-associated air pollution and reduction of greenhouse gases. So as I represent the residents of the City of Newark and my 3 children, we're against this project as it stands. Because currently, 1 out of 4 children in the City of Newark have asthma. More kids die in the City of Newark from asthma than homicides, but what we see in the paper are homicides. 7,000 trucks currently come through the Newark port. With the expansion of this Bayonne Bridge, that will increase to 14,000 to 20,000. We are not satisfied with a simple EA. Like the EPA, we are demanding an EIS. We need you guys to understand the importance that when you raise this bridge and you disproportionately pollute in communities of people of color, you are killing us, and we can't take it anymore. When you also look at the raising of this bridge and you talk about the impacts that it's going to have, you excluded the Newark community. We had to beg to have a hearing today. You had 2 hearings set, one in Staten Island and one in Bayonne. So I'm appreciative that you at least are here to hear our concerns, but Newark is included in this picture. We're dead smack in the middle. I'm a 3rd generation Newarker. I live on the southward side of the City of Newark, which abuts the ports. So my community is directly impacted by the air pollution each and every day that come from these trucks. So we are demanding that the Port Authority calls for 2007 newer trucks and also the electrification of equipment, because we care about the longshoremen and the people who work. My best friends are longshoremen. But at the end of the day, the pollution that's around that port is killing each and every one of us. So we as leaders of the Newark Environmental Commission, we do not support this as it stands. And I also want to just say that we demand a community benefits agreement that will address the health, economic, and social impacts to the community from this project. We didn't see that in your EA. That's not addressed. It's not about the few jobs that you might have while this bridge is being prepared. It's about the longevity. Port Authority cannot continue to pollute my community and not employ us. They cannot continue to pollute this community and disrespect the health of our residents. I will submit written testimony. I just wanted to say that off the top of my heart. But again, you have to be responsible and accountable. There's no figure, no dollar figure you can attach to my 3 children who suffer. And if you ever have anybody who suffer from asthma, when you hear them having an asthmatic attack, think about this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are my streets colorful enough for you? With black and brown kids blissfully living in a world that they weren't ever meant to survive in? Are my streets colorful enough for you? With red covered cement flourish with the names of kids we grew up with? I mean, is Newark colorful enough for you? With Agent Orange seeping through the ground, dancing with our loved ones? Is Brick City safe enough for you? With Starbucks and Chipotle burning down black owned businesses? Is the city we live in safe enough to breathe? With air intoxicated with trucks and transportation, never caring about our safety or our lives? Are we human enough for you, or are we just pollutants left to be cleaned up? Thus, we demand that the United States federal government should establish a domestic climate change policy banning all pre-2007 truck engines from entering the Port of Newark. The Port of Newark is a hotbed of greenhouse gases and decided continuous pollutants. The trucking industry is directly responsible for irreversible levels of black carbon, causing major risk for the low-income neighborhoods of Newark. The rate of pollution is unmeasurable. 3 trucks of men spew toxic through the neighborhoods I walk through every day. Equivalent, Naylor 16. The low persistent run the thromboid machineries everywhere. In 2015, record 3.6 million cargo containers entered reported Newark outbound presents a model that could constantly flow trucks more than 8,700 them more in a single month. Where then 1.4 million trips a year must pass through its winning streets and move beyond between the highway and the port. About 200 trucks per hour, 3 every minute has rendered this beaten down able to toxic mess even a few minutes outside can even take your third diesel bar ticket levels surrounding the porter up to 1,000 times greater than the levels considered safe to breathe at a swimming pool in this iron bomb reaches 20 micrograms of black carbon, the main component of diesel exhaust per cubic meter dozens of times more concentrated in the private pool weaker than middle class neighborhood just a few miles south. 50,000 other residents in the neighborhood and live in the bowl smog, and my community has been registered as a space where political failure is possible because of a lack of policy enforcement resulting in emissions of dangerous levels causing respiratory disease, cancer, prenatal birth defects, and mental disorders, increasing levels of hospitalization. Trucks are the main source of this endless streams of pollution due to the failure of regional municipalities to implement and enforce laws and regulations revealing nearly 16. Diesel exhaust exposures matches predictor of poor health outcomes. Diesel exhaust has been linked to the increased rates of asthma, lung cancer, preterm birth, and have found to cause ADD and ADHD in children. 1 in 4 Newark children suffers from asthma. The hospitalization rate is 150 times greater for the kids living in the city than the rest of the state, and more than 30 times the rate nationwide asthma attacks are now leading cause of school accidents in the region. Air pollution levels at the highest between 730 and 830 where when kids are heading to the school, more than half of the kids in the Iron Body children, and because the many people in the community are undocumented. Chief culprit of the truck that sells these trucks were supposed to be gone by now. The agency said it would phase out all pre-2007 rigs, which produce 95% more diesel particulate matter than the latter models. If ever been fully implemented program, could have cut emissions by as much as 95% by 2017. The Port Authority abandoning the program. And see, the air is unclear, and this smog has fogged my memory. They always told us that we were savages, kids of Newark that are deserving of punishment, but pollution takes it to another level. Pollution is a symptom of our past, is now a product of our future. Something has to be done to start clearing the air. Paragraph 16. Toxic air pollutants and climate change can affect the health and function over the life course, by launching the trajectory and adverse affect growth and developmental delays in utero associated with environmental exposure, decreasing the risk of neurodevelopmental respiratory and other health problems and deficiency in childhood, as well as heart disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and diabetes, and adulthood. There's a considerable empirical evidence that early childhood exposure to pollution impacts the educational and attainment. The impacts of climate change can also play out throughout lifetime. Early adversity and toxic stress are linked to later important impairments in learning behavior and physical and mental well-being. There is growing evidence of transgenerational impacts of early life exposure to pollutants, nutritional deprivation, stress, possibly via the transmission of epigenetic changes. Air pollutants from the burning of fossil fuels have been shown to alter epigenetic marks in newborn, potentially affecting the regulation of genes involved in disease pathways, which may then be inherited transgenerationally. And climate change policy has an adverse effect on vulnerable communities. The AF is a step towards bottom-up policies and governance that has the ability to inspire collective policymaking that has the ability to reduce greenhouse gases, improve air quality, enhancing the livelihood of vulnerable communities. This is key to establishing effective policies. Without this, the communities at risk only face exacerbating inequalities and climate violence. Like Samuel and 8. Climate change mitigation adaptation efforts usually focus on curbing carbon dioxide, but also protecting naturally occurring wetlands and barriers, islands, insulating vulnerable communities. These efforts can exacerbate inequalities with respect to climate change impacts, create problems when it comes to coordinating policy across geographic regions, societies, and local carbon intensity. High citizen concern for climate change might benefit disproportionately from the enactment of mitigation adaptation efforts. Over 100 U.S. localities have joined the Cities for Climate Change Protection (CCP) campaign, the bottom-up policy movement that coordinates mitigation of 800 plus more municipalities worldwide to enlist cities to adopt policy to implement measures to achieve reduction in local greenhouse gas emissions, improve local air quality, enhance urban livability, sustainability. The collective benefits of CCP campaign are potentially significant to CCP programs more than symbolic as and the 5 milestones must be completed for each jurisdiction to remain in participate, conduct baseline emissions inventory, forecast, adopt emissions reduction target for the forecast year, develop local action plan, and implement policies and measures that monitor and verify results. And this isn't something that is new to racialized spaces. Environmental waste and destruction is only an extension of the politics of disposability. We are the pollutants. Brzezinski 14. Consultation over global resource and transnational spaces continues to be affected with racial undertones, political and social questions that frame racial concerns. All of return eventually to the scale of the body. Racialized bodies are coded as a fear and health of simultaneously are seen as polluting the environment. People just become wasteful, easily discarded when they are viewed as threats, but destroy the racialization, naturalized human hierarchy, geography, and environment essential to public discourse and spatial arrangements of spaces that shape the bonds of the color justice is alive, discursively in policy that determine who is deemed to be a citizen worthy of sharing our natural resources that is alive in the bodies of racialized populations suffer the burdens of inequitable exposure to toxic pollution is also present in everyday cultural production and cultural politics.
Alright, good.
Yep.
Do you defend your demand plan text occurs post round?
What does that mean?
So, you say you demand the United States should establish the banning all pre-2007 trucks. Would that actually happen, or is that just, the demand?
Obviously, it's not going to actually happen. We think the demands are good.
Okay.
We're not fiating that.
I don't know.
Okay, cool. Then why vote F?
we think that the dialogue and pedagogy that we create in this round is good.
Okay, what exactly is that education?
Education stems from it stems from our community. We say that demands in our community should be met, especially in a world where these demands are always ignored, right? And that leads to that serial policy theory that we talked about in the top of the 1AC, how these policies get enacted, but they're never enforced, right? Which is why we need the demands in our community and listen to the demands in our community.
So you played the video from Kim Gaddy, and then I believe it's the Samuel card that's talking about these CCP politics are already happening in the status quo. So why is she reading this app in this little room with us 5 people, like, going to change the fact that these demands are already being made?
No, the demands by Kim Gaddy aren't being, like...
That's not part of the CCP.
Yeah, it's not part of the CCP.
They're two separate demands,
distinct, right? The CCP is just an example of micro-political action happening in the status quo that can create effective policy, climate change policy specifically. We say that our dialogue is key to connecting different vulnerable communities and understanding the ways that environmental destruction or environmental degradation happens in certain communities, and we say that dialogue is important.
I guess that begs the question of why here?
We have to be here for our debate scholarships. We would not be in college. We think this is the most productive use of that space.
That's fair. Next question. So, trucks leaving Newark, where would they go after leaving Newark?
Trucks don't leave Newark. It's a question of changing the engineering that exists within the trucks right now.
So it would, what type of engineering would it be?
So the distinction is like a pre-2007 engine versus a post-2007 engine. The distinction is that there is a use of nitrogen in one or the other that decreases the amount of carbon that is emitted. Our argument is that those post-2007 trucks don't emit that carbon. That's the Rivlin-Nader.
Yeah, and then it goes more in depth about how the diesel particulate matter that's used in the air causes 95% of the air pollution that happens in that specific area of the underground.
Sure. I guess next question. They're still using gas, right, to power themselves? Where do they get the gas from? And why shouldn't we also focus on the fact that we're drilling for gas in places that are also affected?
Yeah, I don't think we should. I don't think we should be held accountable to alternative casualties to climate change or that.
There's no reason the AF makes that worse.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, we can say that our AF is key to establishing good climate change policy, and maybe it's key to addressing different types of climate change policy after the trucks are gone. Maybe.
Okay. That's only 5 seconds, so I'm good.
I'll just send it.
Oh, you ended up getting the original email?
Yeah.
Turn me off.
It's 2 off, and then case.
I think I have more. That might work.
You sent it?
Yeah, I just sent it. Is the trash can on that thing?
Yeah.
Thanks. Just a heads up, I don't know if it's the altitude or what, but I'm feeling really lightheaded, so if I start to get really dizzy and have to stop, that might happen in the 1AC, or 1AC. So pretty good. Okay.
It means throughout this EPA and 6 United States and the geographic system means all of the states and voting issue for ground and predictable limits, letting them specify cities or states allows them to spike out of generic topic links and explodes the negative research burden because there are too many cities and states who project a cut a case next to the critique. Or second off, the app strategy of creating individual value for these prevents transition away from capitalism, but the focus becomes how do we adapt to violence rather than dismantling structures that shape social relations. This is written 13 choices thrown around as a means of deflecting critical thought of systems of oppression. It's all about your individual choice. Only you are responsible. Only you are to blame. Anyone who has a problem with that must be judging you as a person. Our advocacy democracy is framed as individual expression. This is a co-option of activism in a neoliberal sense of exploitation. Neoliberalism is all about freedom from government, from regulation, to buy, to sell. It's all about individuals out for themselves. It's how capitalism thrives. When we view social movements, collective endeavors designed to challenge power structures as something done by the individual for the individual, we lose that fight now. Rejecting their race theory framework is necessary to create a radical critique of material conditions of oppression. This is not intended to ignore oppression, but rather a position that linked critique of whiteness to a central dynamic of capitalism. This is Downabale and McLaurin in 2004. A radical political economy framework is critical to diminish the role of the political economy, not race by itself, and expand the transformation of the structure of capitalism. The conceptual framework holds a concrete reality of class, blurs the actual structure of power and privilege. Race is all a barrier to understanding the central role of class in shaping the personal and collective outcomes of the capitalist society. The use of race has become an analytical trap when it is employed in isolation with historical material relations. This design imply that we ignore oppression rather than an analytical shift from race to a plural conceptualization of race systems and articulation is necessary. Now our position is one that attempts to link practice of racial oppression to the central, dualizing dynamics of capital society in order to resist white supremacist capitalist patriarchy more fully. Now resisting capitalism's reliance on economic valuation is the ultimate ethical responsibility. The current social order guarantees social exclusion on a global scale. This is Zizek and Daly, 4. Our ethico-political responsibility is to confront the constitutive violence of today's global capitalism and its anonymization of the millions who are subjugated by it in order to create a universal global system that forces capitalism to seek to conceal our political discourse of violence and constructing a kind of gentrification of the system. Neoliberal ideology attempts to naturalize capitalism by resenting its outcomes of winning and losing as they are simply a matter of choice and judgment and neutral market. The human cost in terms of inherent global poverty and degraded life chances cannot be calculated within the existing economic rationale. Social exclusion remains mystified and nameless. The mystification is magnified through capitalism's profound capacity to injustice, over excesses, and activity to redirect social antagonism and absorb them within a culture of differential affirmation. Now, the impact is extinction. Neoliberalism produces environmental collapse and racialized violence. Their framework is the same form of anti-state individualism that destroys collective politics. This is Dean and 15. Capitalist states have an act on behalf of the system anchored in institutional laws and policy of the state, gives capitalism durability response, keeping the state system running even when its components break down. The IMF and the U.S. Treasury determine the lives of billions of people, but an egalitarian political arrangement on seizing and redirecting the system. Inequality of neoliberalism testifies the impact of left defeat. Neoliberalism subjection can only be carried out as political effect to insist on politics focused on singular micro practices obscures the workings of state and economy, hinders the identification of the system as a site of harm, and disperses energies that could be more effective if concentrated questions of how to win are displaced. Given the climate change, the stakes of politics are unimaginably high. They range from effective industries to a human extinction, not always electric compatible, forcing changes the nature of our time. Given racialized violence and the state is an instrument for racialized hierarchy, our co-organizing politically across issues and identities are daunting. No one of the left resorts to self-care. Instead, it's easy to catalog difference and build up a left to exercise power. It's easy to go along with the history of individualism and it enjoys this to look after ourselves and to put ourselves first and focus on a strategy for collective power. 8,000 alternatives is no alternative ideas need to be systematized into a program and defended. Now, capitalism causes inevitable crises, inequality, and dehumanization. The alternative is an analytical material analysis of capitalism and an interrogation of the socio-political structures it reduces. This is McLaurin and 4. The refrain there is an alternatives and buttressed by symphony of post-Marxist voice. Humanity itself may led by capitalism to a collective suicide, paved the way for the alternative, a global socialism, grotesque conditions of capitalism, flourishing of seeing concentration of wealth created a world divided between affluence and dehumanizing conditions. 2.8 billion lives on less than $2 a day, 250 million children are wage slaves. These realities require an unrelenting critique of capitalism and a collective socialist vision necessitates the movement beyond particularism and forms of politics difference and requires challenging questionable assumptions and common to contribute to the core of radical pedagogy. The concepts and frameworks where we use to express our pedagogical understandings imply intentions and agendas, identify class analysis based for our struggle, imply something quite different from constructing agency around the issues of race, ethnicity, and gender. But the endurance and relevance of socialist pedagogy and politics is centrality according to the interrogation of capital. Leftists must search for cracks in the edifice of capitalism and shine light on the figures that give birth to alternatives. Now the case page cross-ex proofs and damning assumption arguments. A, the only bad pre-2007 tracks not only is a structural adjustment linked to capitalism, i.e. that capitalism will make small systemic adjustments to maintain its guise of ethicality, but also means that 100% don't solve the
and even if it means that they don't, even if they win that they don't admit as much, they still use things like gas, which still requires drilling, which still leads to types of pollution in other areas, which is the structural adjustment.
And B, if trucks aren't in Newark, they will just go elsewhere, like New York City or Trenton or Philly or Camden. All places also have large numbers of black and brown communities. There are 11 other seaports in New Jersey. The affirmative does nothing to solve the incentive to move post-act. This is a huge case here because their micropolitical actions only cause these harms for other communities. Now, relocating to Philly is worse. Their asthma rates are higher even than Newark. Higher pollution rates would push them over the brink. This is law in 2015. Live in Philadelphia, suffer from asthma. Philadelphia has been ranked as the most challenging place in the U.S. to live with asthma. Philadelphia was the third worst place in the U.S. for asthma sufferers, behind only Memphis, #1 in Richmond. Now, the video at the beginning of the 1AC proves a massive reason to vote negative on presumption argument. The 1AC does nothing different from the scope than Kim's actions already been doing. Their act is already happening. Alternatively, if we win any risk of doing this and the academy is bad, you should vote negative because those projects solve. Now, Newark community governance is already happening, and multiple alternative causes do air pollution beyond trucking. Even if they disbanded the entire port, that wouldn't be sufficient. This is Missoula. If you see a community group would not be able to monitor the pollution in the air. PA announced today the domination of air sensors that measure and collect pollution data. Community-based air monitoring projects like this will make public health a priority and pay into multiple dividends. EPA cited several nearby sources of air pollution affecting the city, like 35 waste-related facilities, including the the state's largest garbage incinerator, busy highways and railways. New York has been impacted by pollution from factories, power plants, incinerators, traffic in the airport. Now, personal narratives aren't able to transcend their context into a broader social outlook. This is Love Stewart and Carlin in 2001. A personal narrative has come at the significant cost with the egocentric argument narratives that focus on the self are unable to steer the conversation towards a more transcendent communal outcomes. Public sphere should constitute a space where citizens engage in context transcending validity claims. When citizens ground public policies through personal narratives, they fail to transcend the limitations of their personal lives and move to a broader social outlook. Now, the app alone is meaningless. Focus on creating spaces as community capitalism, thriving on individualized communication. Focused debate provides the opportunity to challenge power. This is Chandler and Tindine highlights the disintegration of the left and the individuated lifestyle. Politics of today's depoliticized radicalism, where it appears that particular individual demands and ideas are to be respected, but there's no possibility of universalizing them into a collective challenge. The left take refuge in the fantasy that the circulation of ideas and information will contract collectivities and communities of interest. This marks the left favor the retreat of the state and the repudiation of collectives. Our radicalism appears to be based on less on the changing of the world than on the articulation of an alternative oppositionalist identity, a non-strategic, non-instrumental articulation of protests against power. The left are too busy writing alternative positions, spaces, and forms to think about engaging with mass society to organize collective attempt. The left's focus is giving voice and creating spaces to reproduce the domination of community capitalism. There's no shared space of debate and disagreement about the proliferation of messages within the responsibility to develop and defend positions that are engaged in no external accountability. Community capitalism is held to threat of an individuated framework which gives the impression of shared discourse or movement in the least reality, just as with neoliberal framework continuing unopposed. This is a critique of how individuals come together on the basis of an invitation for individuals to affirm their own alienation. They can be acquitted with the MS or demonstrations where individuals who are under the banner of now in my name when they seeking personal affirmation and distancing themselves from politics rather than taking responsibility to engage in political structure. Left politics have given up on political structure and instead retreated into micro-political practices, and there's no connection between in-prime prescription and out-of-round solvency. The debate space co-opts politics into an echo chamber where we think we're being heard, but only end up being trapped in the argument room. This is Schlag in 2003. The presumption in the words of the judge will effectively produce social reality. But what reason is there to believe this? The argument in the room is a place where academic advocates go to argue passionately about law and politics. Within the room, arguments are won and lost. But no one outside the room pays much attention to what goes on inside. Participants most often spend their time arguing about what should happen outside the room. This they call knowledge or understanding or scholarship or politics. This one thing that generally cannot be talked about inside the room. The construction of the room itself. In the academy, arguing for a political position is not a political. It ultimately triggers scholastic, highly stereotyped meta discourse about whether or not arguments are advanced or sound, accurate, or should be adopted or the like. In the university, scholarly attention depends on the reduction of new ideas or research agendas. Leads to kind of certain sense of weirdness and deja vu. Stereotyped arguments, standard rhetorical moves, a tendency to find this the same old fights in machines. This is a problem because the belief is the future of the people's liberation over press hangs on their next article. The most significant effective belief is to arrest thought into in play of ideas necessary for creativity. Academics and legitimate their claim to what they say the laws by fashioning laws and academics and requiring expertise. One approach is to reveal the emptiness of the claim to expertise and how these claims gave power. And debate is a terrible form for advocating micro-political activity. It's too individualistic and organized, which creates internal divisions in micro-political groups. This is Mead and all in 2009. Power is a critical element of micropolitics in schools. Micropolitics includes the strategies of individuals used to gain the resource of power and influence further interests. Conflict between groups is one example of when competition for power can be found. Conflict can be highly directed by organization. Groups can become toxic when they become connected to their own goals rather than trying to know the organization of a whole. Now, challenging academia from within it still exceeds to professional and capitalistic demands. Truth can be built without institutions and movements fail. This is Waka and Donate. Degree of autonomy that appears in education related to intrinsic and extrinsic distinctions of how knowledge is organized. This will give way to negotiation of different forms of identities. Educational institutions emphasize relative short-term market needs and vocational applications, and that institutional arrangements stimulate the specific explicit needs of the profession and organization more than intrinsic value. Now, the inwardness of knowledge and identity working congestion. We have two external forces disjointed with higher education, increasing capital oppression to meet market demands. Now, too many manufacturing hotbeds. The app can't solve air pollution. This is Riveland and learn N16 machine. Areas everywhere. Railroad, airport, numerous gas tankers, waste station, incinerators, blue collar engines to keep focusing concentrated in Newark. And the UID sees the system of mass death, global violence.
Okay, that's fine.
Alright, go to this Pacwa no date card.
Yeah.
What does it say? Like challenges within academia are bad?
It says that micropolitics are bad when they occur in an academic setting because capitalistic influences on how those micropolitics organize themselves make them break apart eventually. Because people feel like they need to contribute something to the production of more scholarship or else they're not being productive as a movement.
Alright, so what is individual?
What is an individual?
Yeah.
Any scholar who is capable of producing scholarship autonomously in the context of this card.
Producing scholarship?
Yeah.
I was talking about like, alright, cool. Alright, so how's the app an example of a collective program? Not an example of a collective program.
Is this in reference?
This is on the calculator.
Okay, yeah. So the problem is the app identifies capitalism as being problematic, but it starts with a localized address of one of capitalism's manifestations of power, which is use of manufacturing in Newark. The problem is that you don't identify and go straight to the source of the larger problem, which is capital.
So it's just a structure. We need to have a structural analysis of the way that capitalism works.
Yeah, you need to start with centralized capitalism.
How does that work in our community? Like, what do I do when I go back to my community? I'm just like, I think about capitalism.
Well, when you're organizing and engaging in the kind of political projects the app endorses, instead of saying we need to have an EIS developed, we need to instead just say like overthrow capitalism as a structure.
How do you overthrow capitalism in my
I mean,
community?
that's how the alt functions. So
No, but can you explain the process, like the step-by-step process when I go back to Newark? How do I, in Newark, overthrow all of capitalism?
It builds upon itself. So like the McLaurin evidence gives the example of the WTO protest. They were very close to collapsing all of global capitalism because they were close to making it so that NAFTA was like obviously flawed in all of the world's eyes, right? But they collapsed into infighting because of a debate over whether or not Latin American communities or poor American communities were impacted harder by the regulations NAFTA imposed. So if those kinds
Isn't that a good conversation to have?
Well, no, because that fractured the resistance that inevitably makes it so that capitalism was able to reassert itself. NAFTA
So that means the alternative can't have those conversations, correct?
What? The alternative would espouse... Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright, so what is this link to relocation?
Sorry, what?
What's the internal link to the relocation argument?
Oh, if the trucks leave, they have to go somewhere. So the pre-2007 trucks that are currently move in and out of Newark, they're going to move to different manufacturing ports around New Jersey.
Well, what's the warrant to that? Why is that true?
If the trucks exist now and you make it so that they can't exist in Newark anymore, then they're going to have to go somewhere else. How can you just
stop using a port? Like, there are businesses, like, they have to go through certain ports to get their product.
Yeah, they're going to go to other ports instead of Newark because the plan stops them from doing that. They're trucks. They move on the road.
I mean, people are not going to want to spend the money that it takes to have to adjust their trucks to fit the type of, like, the electric model that the...
let's go to this Philadelphia
I mean, that's just how
argument.
capitalism functions.
So you have this Philadelphia argument about how the air pollution there is worse, right? Why is it okay to prioritize, like, the air pollution and how worse it is in certain communities? Specifically black communities, because Philadelphia is black.
Well, we're not prioritizing it. We're saying that within Philadelphia, asthma rates are higher than Newark, so the app, like, shifting trucks to other places...
There's no... Alright.
Yeah. Can you give me on your one example of a policy that has been done ever in the entire United States?
Yeah, sure. So, like, increasing EPA regulations on specific types of, like, methane, or, like, increasing...
When did that? What policy was that? When did it happen?
I can't name a specific policy, but, like, the EPA is a national policy. A carbon tax would be a national policy on private emissions.
What's communicative capitalism?
So communicative capitalism is kind of the idea of, like, us speaking in this space is going to be able to resolve things instead of, like, actual concrete strategies.
Alright, so okay.
So you would 840 left.
It's no color.
Should be out. Can you move the trash can so I can have at least some type of... Alright. Case T critique.
Okay.
Alright. Everyone ready?
Were their cards sent?
Yeah, I
I'm
sent it.
still not getting it for some reason. Just forward it to me.
sent it. I saved it in the Dropbox as well. Of course, that might not have helped.
I guess you should flash it to me. While she's doing this, you can go ahead and start.
You sure?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Alright. Everyone good? Once you get like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
That sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Alright. Multiple conceded impacts coming out of the 1AC. First, they conceded all the asthma-related impacts. That's for the demand to Kimgatti when she indicates a 1 in 4 children with asthma. However, the later evidence indicates that the rates of breathing air pollution are 1,000 times higher than what is considered to breathe. That is leading to multiple impacts like cancer and preterm births within our communities now. They have conceded multiple other demands within the community, aka things like the EIS or community benefits agreements. Their orientation towards only plan Texas. They forfeit the exclusion of Kimgatti's voice. The fact that they never even say her name or engage in the demands of the 1AC. The implication of how black women are always pushed to the periphery and ignored in these status quo. The 1AC is a changing of the ways in which certain knowledge is considered valuable by forefronting knowledge from those black geographies. They consider that Brzezinski evidence indicates that there are certain geographies that are marked as black geographies that are marked to be pollutants, ones that are always be targeted by the government. Our argument is that to create policies from those black geographies is essential to recreate that type of political reimagination that resolves the impact, which means even if the demands don't but the actual politics of the calling upon the demands as a politics of survivability that is essential. Now the second part of the impact that is not necessarily answered is the performance of the 1AC. We engage in a 3-tier methodological performance, which is a way essential to question with the expert discourse functions. The 1AC is literally that reiteration of expert discourse when they don't engage in the 3 tiers. The 3 tiers or the other 2 tiers of the personal experience or the organic intellectual. There are a couple implications of that when you do not engage in the organic intellectual only places the expert is one that's considered that, which leads to the reason why stereo policy failure exists in the first place, because you never take demands upon those, and those are within the communities. Now for me personally, and looking at the personal connection, is also important to understand how we are implicated and also involved within certain forms of violence. So particularly for me, when I walk through the streets of Newark and I'm scared of the air I am breathing in, or when I sit in the classroom and the mother in my class has to leave because her child is having an asthma attack, or when I am scared that I cannot get pregnant if I stay too long because of transgenerational impacts as per Pereira, or when my teammates are literally suffering for asthma and can't fucking debate in a tournament because this shit is going on. Now the last impact is a proximity to violence, which is present the evidence I explained that above, which indicates that they alternative does not take into account spatiality and how certain spaces are marked as black, which means they cannot engage in that material analysis because that marking of different spaces. Now particularly I'm going to read evidence on why the 3-tier methodology is best, and because they don't meet that means you cannot vote for their knowledge production because they have reproduced anti-blackness within spaces. DSRB 8. The process of finding out society, towns, information, social power, knowledge, and social power that are able to understand and knowledge these practices function, maintain dominance, and boundaries while excluding all general economic practices without claims to the personal, experience, organic, and academic intellectual without the 3 process. They become so we starting to protect the purpose of those with interest, economic power, so on the surrounding streets, my peers, everyday affect my minority practices that they include racial ethnic minorities from policy or discussion because of lack of training, specialization, racial, radical, social, racism, class, sexism, and homophobia from policy or different from the industry, we have solo one perspective, make a claim radical, liberty theory becomes loosely personal areas, function, commodities, function, academic, academics, and expert representing intellectual population with a level object is which they study this in the problematic expressions of social positive rooted in the community, which are really affected by status oppression. Now the particular line by line, they say structural justice from the capitalism. I think it was me more or taking the capitalism, the system of capitalism rebel. They can explain to you in context how they get rid of that system, which means it's not a question of structural justice, but a question of survivability. They have not questioned the sovereignty with a view of 95% reduction in the emissions, which is worth the neighbor evidence. They say we still use gas and other pollution. She should not hold us responsible for the fucked up the way in which whiteness functions. We would indicate that we are slowly stepping in the right direction. They've not explained how we make that use of gas necessarily works. We also the Sandals evidence goes and see that we can create grassroots movements that connect with other movements and other policies and then resolve those issues. Now the trucks will go elsewhere. Now that doesn't make any sense because you still have to pass through certain ports to do the policies. Also, if these trucks would not be able to go through that one port, that area, they'd probably have to change the other parts that we go through in Newark. Also, this argument doesn't make sense because in LA the plan was empirically done to reduce emissions by 70%, and the trucks still are going to pieces like LA. Now this is also not justification to not do the average, the same justification that white people always use to say, oh, this might be the other impact in the future, which answers their Philly example. This is a question of we have to resolve what we can know we can resolve now. We're not to focus on those potential future impacts of bad framing and the way we engage in the debate now. They said the ad it does nothing different because the demands remain in the status quo. One is a question of education dialogue. We have to be in the space. The question is what do we do in these spaces? We said education is important because people who can educate other people in these geographies. Also the three-tier methodological performance is a reason as to why our usage in the debate space is essential. Similarly, we would indicate that the way in which the topic is structured is not in a way in which in forefront voices like Kim Gaddy, which is why it's essential in the debate space. Now, the status quo solves monitoring argument. This is just their evidence is in the out of context as the E. Just as monitoring enough. Look, we would say monitoring is not enough. That's literally the distinction between the EA and the EIS as to why that monitoring does not solve the personal narratives are key, or not. Their argument is that personal narratives are fail. One, their evidence says that personal narratives fail because they stop community building. The whole app is about community building. There's no explanation how that applies to the one I see. Also, GSRB, it's just like community of capitalism. Usually we don't leave like communicative capitalism because we don't just stay in the space. When we go back, we have meetings with people, environmental activists in our communities. We have conversations with people in our communities, which means this is not just leaving the spaces. We educate people. These spaces are not distinct from others. They say no. Around solvency, the slog, evidence slog doesn't necessarily apply to us because we're saying that that's an example I gave above. Now the next argument is that the debate is a bad place. This evidence is not even the context of debate. It just says that micropolitics are individualistic. We have focused on the community building. I think I've explained this clearly above, and also why they did that for close with personal experience, which only leads to the re-entrenchment of whiteness because white people don't have to question their own privilege. Now they say they challenge within the academy is bad. One, there is no other alternative leads to a type of silencing that forecloses black women from existing within the academy, which you are functionally the status quo. They said their alternative causes originator are. Can we read the conclusion of that article? In case to be 95% reduction. Now go to the topicality flow. There are a couple of problems. One is accessibility question. We cannot access a policy throughout the entire United States. This is the DSRB arguments that would foreclose the three-tier methodology. The second is we are reasonably topical. We will have plenty of case arguments and arguments as to why the purpose that they have ground. Also the limits. There's not a clear articulated explanation of what limits they would use. Also our plan would come from the EPA. The ban would come from the EPA, which is what their policy is saying, which means we have all the links from the EPA engaging in type of action. Now there's no specific policy the EPA would literally uniformly enact. There's also not a policy that we can actually have access to because of that stops the grassroots movements. When we have in-means throughout would be a top-down policy, which means that your there would be a bad type of education. The ground that you would do would be an anti-black form of education. Now go to the critique. Multiple problems. The alternative is literally the affirmative, which justifies the permutation do both because we are that material analysis. That's the Brzezinski evidence, which they go conceded, which means the alternative could not resolve the spatial analysis. Now the individual focus is key. You can cross by all my DSRB and proximity defiance arguments that they are not able to resolve any of this. Now particularly, we have to have a reimagination of the political. Their alternative forecloses this by just having rejections McKittrick and 7 representation of black subject world dehumanize the race, possibly black workers, the interior remains geographic narrative, which is that there are ways of colors. The reduction from certain set memory and reimaginable different black as about to black and different language said memory has to be real. And the implications of understanding political reimagination. Used to think historical geographies imagination question turn engagement painfully towards black people and deny humanity speed dreading where how black people face to do perform boundaries for foul reading black diaspora said member of power J because it employs the stimuli by our black and says yes for the possible discursive erasure black people not how they have been implicated production of space images to construct the world of black humanitarianness and the race for non-members within beyond reckless and as well every black system have placed them beyond blacks their discourses geographic solutions different political crisis segregation and person ghettoization genocide racial surveillance as well social spheres adult to bolster undetermined now specifically the first link is individual refer to transition to capitalism. They make them a specific link as to how they make capitalism worse. Also, sometimes capitalism is necessary. For example, we have to engage those forms of welfare. We have to engage with the state in order to survive. They can articulate to how the alternative gets rid of it. Rather, we would say that the way in which the status quo function is to protect white capitalism to reinscribe the value within the black geography or the places as viewed as a pollutant. There's probably a way to step against capitalism. The affirmative will fund massive link. And they said, and they read all these big impacts about things like extinction and having ethical responsibility. One, you cannot resolve that because you've made lots of arguments how things don't necessarily spill over on this round. So how articulate to me how this alternative can necessarily get out of it. We are that material analysis, not the impact extinction. Extinction is already happening to us in the status quo. We'll have how our children are literally dying now. Specifically, they're just say consciousness raising and not the actual work that goes with it, which means they just get stuck within the context of that consciousness raising and never resolving things. To sharpen 14, the need for reinvigoration, reinvigoration of the work of black studies, many ways of working being done with black studies, the Atlantic travel studies, anti-black response studies, about being work of human narrative circle, and other black forces occupy. How do we do the work 10 for cover the identity those living in aftermath social studies not ameliorate the experience of black lives, anti-black words that are great battles of the wake work breaks allowed to live in more than the ritual. I'm going to mark that card a ritual now. Particularly, there's not going to be a root cause of it because capitalism cannot explain things like gratuitous violence against black people or the ways in which certain spaces have been marked as black spaces, and that was what allows that justification to happen because they're not engaged in that. Also, it's proven cross-sex when he indicates that the reason that those movements those movements failed is because they had conversations about race. Probably proves that there's no alternative solvency because there can never be a conversation about race. Now, specifically asserting Class 4 race only reintegrates white privilege, which is impacted by the DSRB evidence is green. And 3 white students help out learning about race. Ones of the denials after colorblind are racism. White students teachers ignore the way race for racism works for claiming class instead of race is regular discrimination agriculture. It's white middle class students about white representation. White racism comes with white limits. White people's real lives also have the way with depression, intersecting cloud racism. Racism continue to be more the white race suppression in literature and courses avoid now. Particularly, there's an ethical responsibility to there's a responsibility. We say debate is a training ground which we can bring community strategy back to a community when we have meetings. They cannot articulate a step-by-step process and how this resolves new work is probably problematic and then problematic, not particularly. Particularly, their Marxist movements will always exclude the conversations of racism. Weston 88, racist practice during the Department of U.S. history, including present-day American society, and forms of racism, but American society most visible ways, passive Marxist conception, racism everywhere in the U.S. social movements engaging in race activities here, because the manner blacks and by dominant political movements as well, and dissident movements in place, American made a difficult to fight the only effectively tempered discriminant next social movements can break out circles, incentivize critical points, anti-racist struggle, major focus on anti-racist coalition will work only lead to democratic social activity for the general struggle of individuality. Okay. This is the first argument I made.
So first I just want to ask about the 3-tiered methodology argument. So how would the 1NC have supplemented its, like, I guess, academic content with a 3-tiered methodology? You would have to have the personal, the other 2 tiers outside academic knowledge, personal experience and organic knowledge. Okay. Personal experience, do you want me to explain those, or? Yeah, well, like, just reading a narrative, is that? No, it's the personal relationship to the arguments that you are reading, why you are reading those arguments, why are those arguments important to you, it's the personal experience. The organic intellectual, I can read you the 4 criteria as per given for an organic intellectual. To be qualified as an organic intellectual, you must, 1, be a member of the degree of community you are discussing. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I guess I just want to ask about why only engaging in one of the tiers excludes the other 2 inherently. So, like, when you make the argument... The argument is that when you only engage in one tier, you only prioritize expert discourse. That's literally her argument, is that debate functions in a way that only reads academics, which forecloses the possibility that other knowledges are viewed as valuable. Okay. It's a performative question. Yeah. So, I guess in regards to 3-tiered methodology, when talking about topicality, why does 3-tiered methodology inherently... Why does the topic foreclose it? Because we would not be able to have those necessarily focuses on individual locales, because we could not have those personal connections, we could not have those organic knowledges, because those organic knowledges have to be members of specific aggrieved communities. I don't think we could read an organic intellectual from literally every part of the entire United States. Regardless, like, you could read the same narrative you read in the 1AC and then affirm a policy that is enacted everywhere. Right, our argument is also that that's bad form of education. That's our whole criticism of the 1AC, is those strategies that revolve around the entire government ignore black geographies, which can then be impacted by both McKittrick's and Brzezinski. Yeah, I want to ask about the black geography argument. So, what is the argument that McKittrick is making in regards to the alternative?
McKittrick makes a lot of arguments.
Okay. Well, like when you read on the K and then you say it's about imagining futures, right? What is that?
It's taking what her argument is taking painful sites, like where pain has existed, maybe like the political, and reimagining and reinvigorating ourselves within that space. So even if they don't listen to us, we have retaken back that space for our own communities. That's that reimagination that gives hope back to black communities.
The hope. What is the like telos of hope? What do you mean by what is the telos of hope? Is it good because it resolved like psychic violence, or is it just?
I think there's multiple reasons. I think psychological violence could be one impact, but I think there are also different impacts, like such as community building. So, for example, Kim Gaddy has started a bunch of nonprofits in our community. She's leading to a bunch of changes within our community. Right? Those are all empirical examples of why around these movements are being important.
Okay. The last argument is about Marxist movements historically excluding race-based foci. Why is that a description of the alternative?
I'm pretty sure, I think when this was clear in cross-ex when you said that those conversations could not happen. I think you literally just gave me the link in 1NC cross-ex that conversations of race could not happen, because that's the reason why, I don't remember the movement you said, why the movement had failed.
I guess, why is this evidence, which is a description of Marxist tendencies to deny that like racism is something that even mediates capital, a description of the alternative?
Because they're 1NC cross-ex answer, I just answered that.
Yeah, I'll clarify. That's fine.
Right. Yes, please.
Do you need a vehicle minute?
Maybe like 1 or 2. Okay.
Yeah, he did. It's hot as fuck.
desktop.
Okay, I have a 723.
That's good.
It should have been sent. And the order is going to be T and then case. You ready?
You said T and then case.
Yes.
I'm ready.
The answer to the three-tier methodology will be on case, but I think they just have to make a value statement about whether the United States should do something throughout the entirety of the United States. Our interpretation is necessarily better for debate because in is throughout is better for ground and predictable limits. First is the ground debate. They can spike out of any type of dissets. If we read generic renewables dissent or an electricity prices, they can spike out of it because we have to spend too much time kind of researching the different cities allowed, which is into the predictable limits debate, which necessarily indicates that there are 50 states within the United States, and there are specific cities within them. They should not have to focus only on those specific, they can focus on those specific cities, but they have to have an overarching value statement about a United States federal policy that is enacted with all in all states. They say reasonability, but you should fall to competing interpretations because it's necessarily better. It makes a judge too arbitrary to fault their reasonability. I also don't think they're very reasonable when it's literally one specific city, and there are still a bunch of cities within Jersey and South. They say there's no limit, so the too many city argument answered above. We specifically lose the topic lakes and the different types of counterplants we talked about in K lakes. Specifically, they say it's come from the EPA, but it's not an overall arching policy. Things like a carbon tax or a methane cap would necessarily be that type of overarching policy, or they can then gain the type of advantages off of basic specific instances. We still would have that overarching policy to have a stable status point to get to that type of education that we talk about, which makes it impossible to go negative. They say there's no specific policy. I did that work about. They say there'd be no grassroots ability. I think you can still talk about those bottom-up approaches while still having this overarching value statement. They say top-down is anti-black. We'll get to that on the case debate, which is now. I think there's a major inherency argument. They say in the 2AC the plan has empirically been done before, which means it puts them in a double-blind eye. Either it fails, which means the plan is never going to be able to actually relate to the type of material consequences that they talk about, which means they can't solve any of the impacts that are indicative of the cancer or the asthma, which is inherently bad, or B, they are not inherent, which is probably a reason that you should vote negative, because inherency is necessary for being able to debate them, because it makes it impossible to go negative, because it's something that's already happened. There's no way to actually kind of have this feel, and it puts them also into another type of double-blind within the pre-2007 trucks. There's either the pre-2007 trucks are not going to be able to actually transfer because they had tried to do this plan in the past and they were all ignored because either the businesses weren't going to work together or there's actually no regulations placed in force on the state, which probably means that their demands are always going to fail. They're not going to be able to get the type of material impacts they talk about, or B, the trucks are just going to leave the state because the capitalism necessitates these kind of structural adjustments in which capitalism will just reshape itself, and the people that are trying to get money, that don't want to spend money to transfer, that are just going to move elsewhere, which is probably uniquely bad because it's just a type of shifting of that asthma in other places, such as Philly, which has an even higher rate of asthma as Newark, and there are other places in Jersey. There are 11 ports in Jersey that they'll just filter back through. I don't think their answer to this makes a whole lot of sense. This just kind of keeps that structural capitalism in place, which just leads to a system of mass death, global violence, and root cause of their resilient adaptability is that type of essence of capitalism. Part 13. Economic meltdown, war in Iraq, economy and ruins, escalation of food prices, speak colonies, extinction 925 million hungry, planet on the verge of boiling point, massive die-out. Well, what is the pale comparison the Holocaust, 2 world wars, genocide in Yugoslavia, Rwanda, Darfur, 1 million left homeless, and 316,000 killed by the 2000 earthquake in Haiti. We do not see the crisis for what it is, we only see it as an isolated symptom, the cause of the disastrous panorama as a metabolic destructive system of capitalism. Just here and there have not been enough to solve degradation, adaptability, modification, and displacement to constitute very essence of capitalism. Capitalism adapts without doing away with the third. One deals with the third, not by challenge, but by buying. Favors and choices bound, and they all lead down through the golden gates. Capitalists have another type of argument is is that they they play the Kim Gaddy evidence, but this indicates that these type of movements are already happening in Newark, and the status quo, which proves that this debate around is not necessarily important for them to be able to go back and teach other people in their community, because that education, that teaching has already happened, minus this debate space, and I'll do a little bit more on that. I think the Missoula evidence indicates why they're not going to be able to solve that. There's a bunch of all costs of the type of air pollution on trucking. They claim the 95% claim, but I think that 95% claim is actually about the trucks, that if they shift over, the trucks themselves will reduce the amount of 95%, but EPA still sorts a bunch of different types of air pollution, and the equivalent indicates that there's a bunch of manufacturing hotbeds that they necessarily will not be able to solve the pollution. So their only argument is about the three-tier methodology, which I think them reading, playing the Kim Gaddy evidence indicates that their three-tier methodology is not necessary in this round. I kind of did that work, but we are necessarily a critique of the academy, which has to come first, but where the three-tier methodology will ever be able to work, because the academy is necessarily anti-black in the status quo, which means their three-tier methodology will just lead to a couple dissats. The Nazar evidence indicates why specifically their narratives are going to just be kind of co-opted within its scientific and organic intellectualism is the status quo. The app is just inserting these type of personal narratives, which is a takeout to the type of positive insertion the app could possibly get educationally. It also takes out this type of community argument. The focus on the self means you can't actually build a community, because you'll constantly refocus these global discussions with yourself. That's the kind of shift argument that is made above. Truck moving to Philly just proves the ground discussions within the specific sphere. In order, you need a ground discussions within the sphere of the community in order to transcend the impact of itself to things that affect communities. And personal narratives establish irrefutable expertise, makes the ballot a referendum on a personal level sphere. And one, personal narratives are difficult to challenge because they established experience, expertise, personal credibility may be less available than technical expertise because it's deeply personal nature. Arguments and technical expertise can be challenged. Such a challenge takes issues with the findings. Does not take issue with the individual challenge to one's lived experience is perceived as a challenge to one's life or character. Such challenges can only suggest that one is disingenuous. Such challenges seem out of place and one should not judge others. And I think your answer to the channel evidence is necessarily not to be able to take it back. It indicates that the left takes refuge in the fantasy that the circulation of ideas and information within these type of spaces will be able to create these communities that they talk about. But this necessitates that the communities are not already existing, which I did that work about why they are, and B, why communicative capitalism is necessarily bad, because there's just a proliferation of the message without the type of accountability that is necessary, which I'm going to kind of impact below. The Schlag evidence is just a type of slacktivism dissent. I don't think they necessarily answer it correctly. It assumes that the argumentation that takes place within the academy is able to transcend the space because it's connected to the outside, but I think this is false. There's dichotomization between this space and the real world. The world of competition means it doesn't necessarily leave this room. It indicates the logic that they'll bring it back. No, that they're just going to end up bringing it to another debate tournament. There's a literal trade-off between outside activism debate and university research agendas, especially means that when we leave the university, we are apathetic to the type of arguments we've done before because we feel like we've already done it within this space. It means there's actual no real world activism. Every time we say there's a difference between activism and a type of advocacy, which just kind of leads to this self-fulfilling prophecy that we think we've done something. And affirmative radical knowledge will only be funneled into the increasing legitimacy of the contemporary university. That makes regimes of social death inevitable. Occupy UC Berkeley 10. Universities may serve as progressive that do not detract from the military, corporate research, and social conditioning within the walls. They serve as machine for concentration of privilege. A hyper-educated society can only exist by the exploitation of the world. Liberals and sophisticate the way that they are complicit in death and destruction, social death, and renal acceptance, an institution meaning for a lack of meaning, the refusal of empathy, abandonment of autonomy, modern cities, or ghost town cities, death, or cultural death. Assuming you excel in university setting, we are enrolling in cemeteries of the nation, which has an absolute fixation with zombies and embedded counteroffensive, and reintroduces negativity and death in the university for perfecting its critiques, generates its own native. The zombies work dead, and if capitalism accumulates because they embody to excess there, the ideal resistance system is abolished by only pushing into a hyperlogical liberal. Student activists are most invested in the fate of the university. They're insistent on saying the university when life is stripped of all the makes life worth living. Zombie politics, the politics of multitude, and seeking to consume the brain's knowledge, objectifying the living dead, awaken capacity for teenagers to decide education, all at the core of our culture. The exclusion of the dead we fail to risk speaking our very last alternative mechanism for preparation of social death, the banal stimulation of existence, markets existence, and even if three-term methodology is necessarily good in the abstract, that means within these spaces that are already inherently anti-black is necessarily bad. There's meat co-option just that just indicates that micropolitics within these spaces are bad. They create discussions and encourage a type of organization of power dynamics that guarantee a co-option, but those with hierarchical discussion, i.e. things like Occupy Wall Street, which ended up being occupied by the types of people that were white and necessarily male, which is always necessarily bad. The PUAC evidence also indicates that they're kind of a publish or perish just that within the space of educational institutions, the way you present your ideology places a value on how that knowledge can be used in the academy within academic spheres, and specifically crafting advocacy in a way that is both strategic and debate, and something that you can judge them by. Might not be the best formulation, does not necessarily mean that they are the best formulation for real world strategy. It's only the way that the debate needs to hear their argument. When they say this space is necessary, that is only because it guarantees education with engagement with this pedagogy is not genuine discussion of how this occurs in the real world. It's just a way to increase their win percentage, which is just going to be another link to cap. And there's a cap cap, and there's that's lethal to the creation of groups that are resilient to infiltration. Jobbins leads 12. With the professionalization of movements, we have lost the autonomy of grassroots movement building. Activism has been supplemented or co-opted with early two foundations of grassroots activism, communities build self-empowerment, self-government, social change movements require considerable resource, but they cannot be defined due direction by a large organization, and grassroots movements are politically insolvent. Murray 14. Over the value of prefiguration, be debilitatingly due focus on internal movements and makes the extensive ability of broader movement focus on symbolic expression to center opposed to the development of alternatives. Market alternatives.
What is the impact of co-option and who does the co-option?
The impact of co-option means that kind of your movements will always necessarily fail because the original root the problems you want to discuss just get ignored because people.
Isn't that the status quo? They already get ignored now.
I mean, sure, but then that begs the question of how you can kind of do anything to promote those discussions being heard. But it also means that
who does the co-option?
Generally white cisgender dudes that are straight and rich.
How does that happen right now? What's gonna happen?
I mean, Occupy Wall Street's a really good example of these type of
grassroots. I'm talking about right now, like the AF. How does the AF get co-opted? Who co-opts the AF?
I mean, it's still within the academy, which means
what is
that
the academy?
The academy is the space we're in. It's the university. It's these type
of
educational
spaces. Why is this space distinct from other spaces?
Which other spaces?
Why are spaces distinct? Why is debate space distinct from outside debate space?
Because the academy is a specifically formulated organization that is different from our
I'm the same person
bonds.
in debate and I'm the same person outside.
Yes,
so what is the distinction?
But the way that we organize political leanings, the way we organize our education.
So I have when I go back to Newark, we have actual conversations with people in our community about these impacts. What is the link to your Schlag evidence?
I think this indicates that you putting this in this space is necessarily
we have to be in this space. So what should we do in this space? I can't just not show the debate tournaments because I would not be in college. So what should we do in this space?
I think you should try to criticize the academy. I think that's the first step.
So the only thing we can do in debate is criticize the academy.
I mean, I think it has to be traced back to that. I think that's probably the first step and able to use this type of three-tier methodology, or else it's just going to be consumed within academia. Because debate is inherently a space where people like to pat themselves on the back for voting for something that makes them feel good.
How is that just not the alternative on CAP?
I think the alternative on CAP is more about our type of political strategies and organizations.
That's not a K of the academy.
I mean, I think it also criticized, I think the links to CAP are also inherent within, these type of academic discussions, and we criticize the material structures that are inherent, how academy is formulated within that capitalist system, i.e., the public or perish, the publish or perish to said that either you have to kind of fall into these academic notions of, you gotta publish a book to,
what have you done to challenge the academy?
What have I done?
In the performance of the 1NC, what did you do to challenge the academy?
I think the actual material tracing back through the alt card is
how is the AF not that material tracing of materiality?
Because I don't think you do that within a capitalist system or a capitalist.
How?
Because that is not
literally criticizing how capitalism functions in the Brzezinski evidence.
I don't think that's your main focus, though. I think that 1AC.
What is the brink for a main focus?
I would say, I think Austin will probably cover this pretty well.
It's my last cross-sex, though, so what is the brink?
So I think it has to be, the overall connecting, identity between these different types of groups. And that has to be the forefront.
It hasn't been done in Newark. That was an LA example. Why are we not inherent?
You said the plan is
done in LA.
In LA. But also these examples of, these individual grassroots movements are already happening, i.e. Kim Gaddy. Or Gady.
I'm just going to send the card back. It did not. There we go. Okay, it should be signed. Just give me the K with an overview. Is the trash can? Look at that.
Our alternative is analysis of the material structures of the creative oppression. The McLaurin evidence makes the warrant that this anti-capitalist socialist pedagogy is key to challenge the capitalist control over education and finding actual alternatives to the capitalist system. Capitalism is inevitable only in the world of the affirmative. We have three key framing questions to support the alternative. One is materiality before ideology. The ideology the affirmative promotes ultimately tints how they see the world and inhibits appropriate action over material conditions. An objective material analysis is necessary to establish conditions for work or revolt, which is the opposite of a three-tier methodology. The second framing question is economic models produce culture. Evolving economic models through history place people in different socio-economic roles and ultimately define how they them culturally and socially. That means the social locations are locked in. Absent the alternative means the Afghans solve their impacts. The third framing question is that the conditions for collapse of capitalism are inevitable, and now the alternative is just key to capitalize on them. This is Miller in 91. Inevitably be overthrown as a result of internal dynamics. Socialism will be established consequently as the number of capitalists mitigates their role to be gross over all the role of the working class. The process has two aspects: growth and suffering of the proletariat, growth and unification together with increased centralization of capitalist production, making it impossible for workers to seize control of an economy. The capitalism was due from the start. This is not to say capitalism has to regardless of radical alternative processes initially motivated short-term narrow goals, eventually give rise to long-term societal goals. Now that means the debate has ceased to become a question of whether or not the alternative solves anything here, and instead of the question of if we win a link argument, because you have to decide whose pedagogy better enables an acceleration of protests that are already happening. And definitely the critique definitely outweighs the magnitude. The conceded causes extinction, which turns all their impacts, because in a world of rampant infighting that causes racialized violence to happen on a daily basis on the line by line proper. The first argument is the permutation, which really only begs the question of a link argument, which I'll went further down on the line by line. Here are some reasons why it does not solve it. It's mutually exclusive because the alternative has to come first. Their ideological focus inhibits meaningful change by both obscuring the right end goals and by giving a point for conservative backlash to which turns absolvency. Now, the strategy of individual focus is mutually exclusive with their approach that is based on systemic struggle. This is Bronner intent. Ideology is not a taxi like a taxi cab where the passenger can say they're ever stop the corner when it get off. The same is true of identity. Precise subjectivity undermines both systemic concepts of capitalism and class, as well as universal categories dealing with the other competition for finance that resources tend to intensify intolerance and legitimize claims that generate the difference among identity groups who appear as they most victimized identity politics is used as class ideal, proof mutually exclusive now, and if they don't get a permutation of methods debate, because without a plan they can permute any component of the app and alternative methods, which is unpredictable and makes it impossible to consistently test the affirmative. Now the permutation is a new link because there's a footnoting decided locating classes alongside identity locating classes alongside other identity strips of a class of its concrete socioeconomic nature. This is McLaurin in 04. The race, class, gender triplet can sound vaguely Marxian. It is not race, class, and gender are not co-primary classes. A wholly social category class is looked as part of the triptych is cut of its practical dimension, but a class is transformed from the economic category to merely a subject position class, therefore cut off from the political economy, socializing the effect of replacing class analysis with cultural analysis. Post-Marxist triptych class idea of class of its element, which makes a radical universal form. A world without classes is imminently imaginable. There will be no true resolution of racism so long as class society stands so much as racially oppressed society implies a class-defending state, nor can gender economy be enacted away so long as class demands exploitation. Historical materials and real categories of difference constitute the ways in which oppression is experienced with that class-based similar framework to diminish from others and invoke class to work around the idea that class matters since class is not simply another ideology, which also supports our recalls arguments. Now the next argument they make is the McKittrick card. This is entirely indicative of the 1C-Wren link argument because they're a replacement of systemic structural analysis with an individualized approach to oppression that causes us to spiral into a cycle of self-care and capitalism and allows capitalism to continually reassert itself. Also, the focus on affective resistance is multicultural neoliberalism at its worst. It replaces structural analysis with psychological self-esteem engineering, which are products of neoliberalism individualistic focus. This is Reed in 13. Argument casts economic problems in psychological terms. It just appears a matter of denial due to recognition of Rubin's proposed local like self-esteem engineering, and nothing could be indicating neoliberal ideological hegemony rather than the idea of representation of practices constitute meaningful struggle. It is possible only by ignoring capital's material imperatives that various autonomy actually affirm industrial processes by emphasizing them especially in the fronts and niches that depend on the fiction of authentic power. The heroes of cathartic tropes that pretensions of social significance is their substantive contest ideological contribute to the naturalization of neoliberal ontology. Deeper messages that there is no thinkable alternative ideological order in which we live. This shapes the fantasy world to masquerade as escape and the claimant regards a simple platitude or filter than substance. I'll cut the evidence of substance. That also answers the next argument line by line because it's about hanging on to certain aspects of capitalism for short-term survival. This one is indicative of a Wren because it's a process of capitalistic stringing along that makes people incapable of seeing capitalism as anything other than immutable. And two is what they want to see Zizek evidence criticized because they focus on flashpoints of subjective violence, which make people believe that they need capitalism to save them from larger forms of negative violence. Now, their argument about spillover are questions of pedagogy, which some McLaurin evidence makes pretty clear should be answered in favor of us because pedagogy can either delay or accelerate capitalist revolution because those revolutions are happening now. That's the WTO example I gave in Crossix. They haven't answered. Now the root cause argument doesn't answer the 1C's overarching argument about how capitalism structures society through the plotting of land and the enforcement of agrarian norms, which does explain gratuitous violence because that violence is a result of the fearing of imbuing black bodies with excess value, which is what capitalism allows for. Now, group all of the arguments about the alternative being silent on issues of race is the same mischaracterization of what McLaurin says is the issue with the affirmative. Racism can be discussed insofar as it is a manifestation of capitalist exploitation, but it has to continually centralize capital class analysis, which is the opposite of fighting over whose exploitation exploitation is worse, which is their answer / why the WTO protests were disbanded. Now, politics of class does not prevent fights against racism, but acknowledges materialism forms the basis of all oppression, which is then subdivided by individual and collective structures. McLaurin in 2004, a more comprehensive understanding of the historical injuncture and necessity for grounding class analysis does not render necessary the concern of those marginalized by race, but is often assumed that foregrounding capitalist social relations undermines the importance of sitting to a different trivializes the struggles against racism. Heroic class-based politics identifies as white, and such formulations rest on a generally unspoken logic that assumes that racial minorities are only conjecturally related to the working class. Most practice critique is racist insofar as it implies that people of color could not possibly concern with issues beyond racial differences. Positive people of color is one-dimensional characters. Primacy of class means that building a multiracial, multi-gendered working class or organization should be the goal of any revolutionary movement. So the primacy of class can be put to fight against racism and sexism at the center. This oppression is multiple and intersecting, but it's causes not exploitation and oppression are defined by capitalist rule and a capitalist evolving U.S. society. African, Mexican, and Asian bodies were colonized and racialized races, constructed out of raw materials furnished by class relations, where function in physical traits and signifiers of class identity reify social relations because racism or irrationalism or modalities in which class struggles articulate themselves as strategic points. But one may speak of any number of oppressions, but one cultivates politeness and interactions about the structure of capitalist class relations in which oppressions are embedded. Post-Marxists have failed to see the most of managers of the past 2 centuries, the annexation of the globe for the dominance of capital.
8:48.
Just one clarification question.
Yeah.
What is affective resistance?
So that was the psychic violence argument. That's what the card is referring to.
Yeah, but what is affective resistance?
So the idea that by engaging in the app, we can make it so that how we relate to our own affect regulation.
So my question is, what is affect?
Yeah, emotion.
Emotion.
Yeah.
Okay. How do we never speak without emotion?
That's not our argument. Our argument is that the app pretends to be a form of affect regulation, i.e. you make it so that in the future you can deal with your own affect regulation better by resolving psychic violence. I have to step out of this room for a little bit.
Okay. I gotta find it. Give me 1 second. Keep
It's
writing
like the
off.
top. It's like the top.
Oh, it's like the top. Oh,
Since you made the
yeah, it's just that the movements are happening in the status quo, which means that there's no reason as to why the app is key. We have to be here, so it's a question of how we use those spaces. We indicate our performance, aka the 3K method, and the Brzezinski stuff proves that we're not talking about it this way in the context of the resolution.
Wait, that's we have a question about. And what's the second one?
The Brzezinski stuff says the way we talk about climate change policy does not include these local geographies, which means in many ways it's changing the way the resolution is discussed. Does that make sense?
There's no T really. I don't think.
So T, I don't think they have actually answered Brzezinski. You should go for that, which means their education is bad because it doesn't start from that spatiality position. You can also do McKittrick's to impact that. They are also usually extends to your policy for their own means. The reason why policies fail is they are global and don't focus on specific geographies, which means that is a bad type of education. Also, usually the argument I make is no policies function at that huge federal level. They only do 2 specific apps, which doesn't sound like this is good ground.
Hard to make a debate.
What? Extend reasonability and kind of case arguments. Obviously, there's ground theory which rejects it. That's fine. That's fine. One quick thing. Would you answer this argument that like they can't question personal narratives? The argument was like they can't contest the personal narrative. Our argument was like it's not you contest the personal narrative. The personal narrative is key in conjunction with the argument. You didn't answer all like the co-option stuff.
Yeah.
You answered the strong stuff.
Strong.
Throwbacks.
Alright, I'm good.
Do you have answers to cap class?
I know that. Where's that at?
They read it on the critique about 4 or 5 arguments in. What was the first part? It was from like 1991. Obviously, cap hasn't collapsed in that correction from 1991.
Alright, I'm good.
352 remaining.
Alright, case, then the K.
It was T
Oh, my fault. T. Case K.
Are there any cards?
No.
Cool.
And then there's an overview on the case. Can I see this?
You said you started with T and then going to case?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we can just put it in a case where we can both see it.
What was your order? Sorry.
T case K. Case for the overview.
T case. Gotcha.
Their type of education is bad. You can extend and pronunciate and classify the pronunciation evidence that you're essentializing discourse. Discourse never is bad because we never get to talk about the particularities of black geographies. Now we're gonna say that there's no impact to your ground arguments that impact to your ground argument. We're gonna say that serious policy failure exists in the status quo because we never get to focus on specific black geographies and the ways in which black geographies and policy did pass but never enforces. Which why we need to resolve. We need to listen to demands and met by our community. I.e., why we read Kim Gaddy next. We're gonna say that your hard debate is good debate and that you reason really checks the T argument that you have specific case arguments, no reason why you lose ground. Go to case overview.
Go back real quick. They only give 2 examples, which isn't enough. Also, the SOP's bottom-up solution.
All right, and on the T, they only give 2 examples. It doesn't solve. Top down is bad. Case overview. Filter everything through our 3-tier methodology. We only start to preach academic scholarship without actually listening to the voices that are affected by the anti-black and indigenous policy and status quo. Personal experience is key to understanding the ways in which that we implicate and also privilege in some of these discussions, which is key to resolving things like colorblindness and serial policy failure that exists in the status quo. A couple of net benefits. First is colorblindness disembodied politics leads to a serial policy failure because laws and regulations get passed but never enforced, which is why we need to hear the voices in our community to make sure these policy demands are being listened to. Second, this leads to the framing of the round. If none of their arguments can be articulated or have an effect on the people of Newark, specifically Kim Gaddy's children, and that have asthma, then their shit doesn't matter. There, and we're gonna impact on their performance. There's a body philosophy exists as a view for nowhere. Just taking purported neutral and visible sense leads to that whiteness and whitewashing those particular geographies. And we're gonna make a possibility to violence argument. Black spaces always be the toxic, which is why cities can become contamination leads to that sign economy of blackness and leads to the disposability policies that they can see now. We're gonna say accessibility question politics have always been seen, which is why we have to use spaces to create dialogue that to connect the space in the community forefront the voices like people like Kim Gaddy. This is specifically and that's key to addressing the demands of the community now. The impact framing, the universalized impacts only essentialized, homogenized the population gloss over the particular types of violence, structural violence that happens in disposable communities. Our average key to checking that you can classify an analysis to the K for the superb we're going to use that as a net benefit to our methodology and permutation. Go to specific case arguments. They say first on the first double turn argument that we're going to say that they misinterpret the empirically done argument that we're saying that's empirically done in LA. It doesn't that it still hasn't been done in Newark, which proves an inherent barrier that trucks exist in Newark. Trucks still exist in Newark. That's an inherent barrier. Second, now go to the second double turn argument, double bind argument to say that we have to be here's a question of how we engage. We say we engage within the discussion in the debate space. Second, we say that the demands have been talked about in the status quo, but they haven't been actualized, which is why we're going to say that circulation of Kim Gaddy's movement is key for creating that political dialogue, which is also going to be impacted by the Samuel evidence, which you can see, which leads to that spillover effect. The ways in which our dialogue can create effective climate change policy. Effective climate change policy. We can understand the ways in which different communities are implicated within environmental degradation. Now they say that movies are happening in status quo and that education is already happening. Now we're gonna say that demands already having been met and that circulation is key. They say that alternative casualties reaching to be held accountable to the alternative casualties. This ignores the intricacies of black geographies, specifically the types of structural violence that's happening through the trucks argument. We're gonna say that our spillover effect can challenge the other forms of climate change. They say 3 tier is not necessary. We're gonna say that this. We're gonna make a whole a framing argument here. They say that they assume that the 3 tier methodology is not already a critique of the academy. We're gonna say that hegemonic discourse is the expert discourse, and that which is why we need subjugated knowledges to combat the hegemonic discourse that exists within the academy. They say that narratives lead to co-option. First, we're gonna say that this is not unique co-option. You're gonna extend the non-unique argument co-option, commodification is inevitable. We're gonna say we're gonna impact turn this and say circulation is good and circulation is good. There's no impact to the co-option arguments. They don't explain who actually co-opts our arguments. And next, they include their personal experience bad arguments. We're gonna say that if this is a personal experience bad arguments for the bad. We're gonna say that personal experience is probably bad if we don't tie it to community action, which is what your the authors talk about. We say that the 3 tier methodology is able to resolve that. Now we're gonna make a double turn argument here because your alternative is literally saying that we should have in the K debate says that we need to have a pedagogical analysis of the way capitalism works, which means that's a double turn to your academy argument, because you still allow the academy to exist, which exists, and it's probably worse because you are contradiction, because that contradiction means that we can never have effective policy and we never actually go to our communities. They say they say relocation arguments. We're gonna say the relocation never doesn't happen. Ellie proves that relocation doesn't happen, and it's fucked up to make that prioritization of air pollution in Newark and then in Philadelphia. Okay. You're gonna cross-apply that capitalism is, you're gonna extend the capitalism is inevitable argument that they can see these. We're gonna say capitalism is inevitable. It's a question of how we engage within capitalism in the state, and the state which is engage in the state, which leads to that's a positive survivability. You understand the permutation do both arguments. Say the key. This is key for understanding the intersectional analysis of how power functions at the ways, and specifically black geographies. We're gonna say that that they assume that we weren't already a structural analysis of the way that black geographies work. This is answered by the Berninsky evidence. And we're gonna say that combination of structural analysis of understanding the ways in which blackness and black geographies are rendered disposable, but that also is key to understanding the ways in which particularities of the violence that happens. They say now you can extend that the specificity that the links are still to the status quo. There's no specific link to why the demands of Kim Gaddy will actually lead to the impacts of the critique and impact of the critique. Now they say capitalism will collapse. Now that's probably going to be a reason why they're not unique to their impact argument, because the capitalism is decreasing now. That means that their impact should already happen. We're going to say that there's no explanation to how the alternative would be able to resolve the impacts of the critique. We're going to say that they say we foot no class. We're going to say that we don't actually foot no classes. We've already been the critique. We've already been the structural analysis of capitalism and race.
723.
Real quick, did you just get why this like capitalism declining now argument is our argument?
Yes.
Okay.
It's about like capitalizing decline to make sure we use our types of structures.
Well, it's just about achieving revolution in a short enough time frame to stop extinction because of extractive industry.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah. Cool.
So like the revolution will probably happen. It's just a question of if the occurs or accelerates it.
Okay.
Which is also the Miller 91.
Yeah, but different.
Minus one next round.
From between.
Restructuring.
That's just a reason why you can resolve their impacts. It's not like a link necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, you should make that argument, but do it on the inside. I mean, the academy arguments in the case were just like, the academy sucks at academic content because neoliberal structuring.
Sure.
Well, that means that resolving capitalism ourselves. That way the academy sucks up academic content.
I think we can screw
And when the alternative is really just identifying and isolating the problematic aspects of all these pedagogy in terms of how it addresses capitalism, that means the alternative doesn't have to produce action. It just has to identify why the action that it proposes is bad, such delays capitalist revolution.
Okay. Yeah, that I just need you to write that down for quick, like the impact of it.
Oh, yeah. It's like 2 seconds.
Yep.
gonna go T, then cap, then case.
Yep.
Alright. Everybody good? T is just a referendum, which means going forward it's going to necessarily take out all their impact, their offense on this, which means they're not going to be able to go for this against us because it's just a referendum onto the criticism. The K is going to outweigh and turn the case. The D evidence necessarily says the environmental collapse is inevitable in the world of capitalism. It's going to be the ultimate root cause of all the types of violence. It's because of the economic rational models that they don't kind of grapple with. It's going to win on magnitude. First, environmental collapse is going to cause the death of the entire world. It's just going to necessarily outweigh when they don't answer this type of impact framing. It's going to be necessarily bad. And probability is always going to flow to the app because capitalism is inevitable. That means it's true. The alternative is going to be able to resolve these type of instances. It's also going to the analysis, the historical creation of cap is necessary to kind of change how these spaces operate in the status quo. And the spaces were spaces were already made into capital because of capitalism, which is going to be the root cause of most of their violence because there's about a choice of ownership and the fear of bodies having types of access value, which means we're going to be resolve the entirety of the criticism and the entirety of the case. Only the socialist pedagogy is going to overcome the type of pitfalls that the auth falls into because they're trapped within this type of neoliberal academy, which only the alternative is going to be able to do because the alternative is to identify and isolate the problematic aspects of the 1AC. It's not necessarily about producing action, but saying why the act is bad and necessarily delays the type of revolutions that are coming now, which is the Miller evidence on to the type of blind violence. They say capitalism is inevitable. It's a question of how they engage. Capitalism is only inevitable in the world of the alt. The Miller evidence indicates why revolutions could happen, but they're only holding them back to being able to be the most type of effective type of revolutions they could be. They say perm do both. They also don't answer that they don't get permutations in the method debate. It's necessarily impossible to go negative in that type of world because they can just kind of shift out of the 1AC problematic parts in the link, which is really bad for grounds and for predictable limits. They say it's about the combination. I think the McLaurin evidence necessarily gets to why capitalism must be the basis for the combination of this type of violence. It indicates that there's a comprehensive historical junction which necessitates foregrounding this type of capitalist analysis to be able to overcome it. It does not necessarily say that we can't talk about racialized violence, but we have to talk about racialized violence and how it's traced back to this type of capitalist superstructure and neoliberal ideology, which I don't think the app necessarily grapples with in the 1AC, which means the permutation is necessarily going to be the type of footnoting dissad that they link to it. I think it's footnoting dissad is also McLaurin evidence, which indicates that class is a wholly social category that kind of unites all different types of minorities together. The class analysis is a type of cultural analysis, which when they don't answer the economic drives culture, they are not able to grapple with what drives the type of violences that occurs within racism. There's no true solution to racism as long as class still stands. So this type of footnoting is necessarily bad, which is going to answer the type of specificity dissad that they're going for. They say that the unity is take out that the impacts should be already happening. They don't seem to grapple with how Miller actually makes this claim that it's about us enacting the revolution to be as efficient as possible and preventing. It's about a time frame type distinction in which the time frame of capitalism collapsing is going to be much quicker when we do not have these type of revolutions to try and solve the material implications of that happening. They say that all does not to be able to resolve it. I think I did all the work about why it's about identifying the types of problems so we can resolve them. I'll go to the AF debate now, the case debate, unless you think there's anything else I need to do. Oh my god, I'm stupid. Links are all just sets to the perm. That's why I have 3 minutes left. One, acceding to the inevitability of capitalism while claiming to understand it and how media their impact is necessarily going to only lock them within. It makes them kind of put on the blinders to make it impossible to solve. And 2, believing that capitalist investment is necessary in the short term to survive, i.e. the welfare argument just kind of lets capitalism reassert itself because people will always cling onto these types of hope. And 3, all the arguments they make about the alt-bracking out discussions of race, it doesn't. That was the one-hour analysis of McLaurin. I already did above. These all actions delay the inevitable revolution. And also no answer in the 1NR read evidence means they get sucked in to the academy because they're focused on cultural artifacts like geography and how racialized violence produce psychic violence individually. Strategies that address this type of affect-based violence first include focus on broader material structures because they always sequence before material action, like how they use McKittrick card. They also conceded the Ryan card, which is a really good indict of the 1AC itself. Their strategy for addressing capitalism is an individualized focus on capitalist violence that causes them to look away from structural solutions to capitalism as a whole. That has been proven repeatedly by their arguments, i.e. focusing only on Newark's type of violence instead of focusing on how capitalism itself has restructured the geographies which has allowed Newark happen in the first place. On to the case. I'm going to sit on this inherency argument because I don't think they're answering right. Their card indicates that Port Authority tried to enact this type of plan to ban the 2007 trucks in the past, but it failed and was abandoned. Probably proves that the demands are never going to work, which means they don't get any of the material impacts that they're going to try and go for. And the Samuel evidence indicates that the state will never listen to these type of demands that they're making, which probably means they're only going to fail unless we take out the type of state, the academic state capitalist links that the alternative is going to come for. The movements are also already happening in the status quo. They give a reason why them being a debate is necessary, but they don't give a reason why these movements within this particular round are necessary. I think these conversations are already occurring in Newark. Kim Gaddy has already given this speech. These CCP is already existing in the status quo in which these types of organizations are trying to create these bottom-up grassroots politics, which does not necessitate us discussing this around debate may make us educators, but I think the type of education, when it's necessarily imbibed within this capitalist ideology, is going to be bad because they're not going to be able to type of move, kind of make these grassroots grassroots effects spill over. I'm not going to go for the double turn argument. It's pretty much all I really need to answer on this flow. I think it indicates that the alt is actually going to be able to overcome this type of academic neoliberalism because of the type of pointing out of how they are focused within it, which means it's not necessarily about the actual actions, but about creating the new type of pedagogy, which makes us aware of the type of neoliberal institution that exists, which means only the alternative probably is going to be able to resolve this type of publish or perish argument that's necessitated by the debate space itself.
352 remaining.
Right. No. Yeah. I can make that my fourth formation.
We have to so we have to wait until kids and have to keep that because a revolution might occur.
Did you read the book?
Yeah.
That's all I need to know.
Oh, this is not you. Just shoot out. Extinction already happened.
They kept saying we get checked on the other time, so we don't know the questions and tackles off, so that's the three too.
Like these are the fun ones. And then you get the
Which one is that?
one is
Oh, like the impacts of 13?
okay,
What's that?
cool. Yeah, that. It's really reading something.
Right.
Well, then that's what I would tell you. And it's what I would tell you. There's one more in that case. How long did that? 4 minutes?
That was a 4 minutes long. Mine? I think so. It's yours. It's so hot in this room.
Yeah, that's
It really
what
is.
it's gonna be dizzy. Let's do 9.
Huh?
Who's in D9?
There is no D9.
No D9?
No.
I was like, that, yeah, I know I already died. That explains a lot.
Yeah, no. It doesn't exist.
You want to see me?
Hmm?
You want to see me?
No. Who did I choose the last one? Oh, I only ran. Okay. And Taylor's the judge. I hate this kind of downtime for speech.
Because you just want to speak, so you don't know.
Right? Because I've already prepped it, I just want to, go.
I know that feeling. Michelle does this to me all the time, so.
That's because lunch was trash. It was awful. Absolutely tasteless fucking food.
No seasoning.
Right, no seasoning.
It was a bowl of meat.
Oh my god, stop. This shit is so annoying. Yes, it's real annoying.
That's how you know it's pronounced, you know.
Stop. Stop.
Also, I speak a different language. I speak Ebonics. You know?
You're so annoying.
You can speak English?
Willie Sebastian announced top 5 and gave 3 awards. So 5 are announced. 3 are given.
Probably.
I just wanted to get my speech.
Not like that. That was ugly.
I messaged her. She hasn't seen it. Okay, she's on her way back.
Alright, so the order is going to be case and then the critique. Is everyone ready?
Yep.
Okay. I think this is going to be a very easy affirmative out, and they do not engage in any of the answering the three-tier methodology, which is its entire top portion of the 1AR goes completely concede, which is a question of how the academy functions. They read a lot of arguments why we have to question the academy, question the way in which neoliberalism in the academy functions. Our DSRB evidence indicates the only way you can challenge capitalism within the academy is through the three-tier process, which means you cannot resolve your own alternative because you have not engaged within that three-tier process. Now, the three tiers, I don't think I have to re-articulate this again, but academic, personal, and organic is essential to what I mean. When you only have one, you prioritize certain forms of knowledge to indicate that the organic knowledge is not important, which recreates that same type of anti-black violence, which pushes black women to the side and say that your knowledge is not valuable. It pushes people like Kim Gaddy and tell her that she should not have spoken, which is that type of silencing and disembodied politics. They can see the colorblindness impact, which can be further impacted by the 2AC evidence, which is on the critique, which is the green evidence that recreates white privilege, which means you can never resolve the impacts of the 1AC through your alternative because you never have conversations of that colorblindness, which also leads to that disembodied politics, which means you don't have that self-reflexivity that's essential in the personal tier, which means that you have literally recreated the same types of oppression that is the DSRB evidence, which also then concedes, which says that it's literally when you exclude the organic intellectual that it prevents radical solutions to racism and classism, which means that you cannot resolve any of your impacts. This goes completely to the city. I don't think I have to re-articulate this here. Now, the second primary issue is spatiality. There's no answers to the ways in which space functions. That's what Brzezinski and McKittrick's evidence indicates that the capitalism cannot explain how certain spaces are demarcated as being pollutants, right? There's no explanation of how capitalism is the root cause of that. For example, I can give the example of how Trayvon Martin was shot because he was viewed in a space that was not viewed as a space he should be in. Their alternative cannot necessarily articulate the way in which spatiality functions, which becomes a net benefit to the permutation because their alternative A was not really articulated or extended, but rather they say that we cannot have necessarily these types of discussion over spatiality because it refers to the individualistic focus. If we are impact turning that notion of individual focus is bad and saying that we have to focus on the individual geography to lead to a form of essentialism and universalism, which is how the federal government functions to determine all black people is the same, which you just mark them as those pollutant spaces, which means the alternative cannot resolve. Now, the third framing question is the question of how these structures are inevitable. There's not an actual alternative that's really extended. It just says, oh, the revolution is coming, but there's not an explanation of the step-by-step process when we come back to our communities. Just debating around is a question of education. When we go back to Newark, what do we do in our communities? I think I set this up to the 2AC, which indicated that they have to prove a step-by-step process in order for us to resolve the implications in our communities. Literally, they're just saying we should just wait around until the revolution happens and let your kids die. Until it happens, we would indicate that even if collapse is going to happen, collapse in the future, they have not explained how particularly the demands as made by Kim Gaddy stops that revolution from happening in the future. Sometimes we have to have a way to survive. They've conceded that capitalism is sometimes necessary for black folk to survive. So which means the question of survivability. Now, the affirmative line by line, the only argument they make is how the Port Authority tried the demands were not met. They have conceded our circulation good argument, which indicates that even if the demands are not met, it's our education, which leads to these type of coalition building to ask for these Samuels evidence, which indicates we can make conversations with people from other geographies, understand the implications of different black localities and geographies, and bring those together, create solutions, which is why context and education key. We have to be in these spaces, which means that we are a rupture on traditional academic notions through the three-tier methodology, which means that we have performative reason why, because they say the state will never listen to the demands, even if the state doesn't listen. They have conceded the McKittrick's evidence indicates that not even if the state doesn't listen to the question of political reimagination leads to the politics of survivability, where it leads to a type of community building, which is essential through even just the process of making the demands, and also the circulation arguments are not necessary answered, which is why it's important to educate other people who are not from our geographies. And the Brzezinski portion of the affirmative does not get resolved because even if you don't believe the demands necessarily, even think our entire bottom portion of the analysis not answer the same movements in the status quo saw that's answered by we spill over past produce CMO's evidence, and also the educational claims I literally just made above. Now they say education is capitalistic. You have not questioned the academy. Your performance debate literally did nothing to perform in the academy. This is where the double turn comes in. The performance of the negatives and massive double turn, because they tell us that the academy is bad, but we should engage in good pedagogy to resist capitalism. But this is a performative contradiction that should impact the way you frame them around, because they have a contradiction as fluidity of that whiteness. There's literally no explanation how the alternative doesn't. It doesn't sustain the academy to producing new pedagogies in the space. Now they say the alternative can overcome neoliberal academic neoliberalism. No, you cannot, because you can maintain the same notions within the academy that only certain knowledge is considered valuable, which probably means that your revolution will never happen because the people at the top who prevent that revolution will always continue that. Now the critique flow, almost all the case analysis, all the framing questions are going to be the way in which you frame the analysis of the critique, because they've not engaged in that three-tier process. You should not be able to vote for them. Now the outweighs arguments in turn the case because they make an argument of how the environmental collapse arguments couple responses. One, there's no articulation explanation of how the alternative resolves all these environmental impacts coming from capitalism. There's no extended alternative. There's also not an argument of how capitalism was collapsing. Now, their evidence was from 1991, which means either the impact should have already been triggered, or capital never actually collapsed. There's not an articulation of a warranting of why capital collapsed. Now, the root cause to be a couple of problems with this one. They don't understand spatial domination, which is Brzezinski, which means you cannot control the root cause. And even if they do win the root cause, they don't understand how that explanation of the root cause then resolves the impacts of things like asthma within our community, which the alternative can never resolve because the particular demands of the UNC are essential. The fact that they never articulate solvency for things like those asthma, but instead we just have to wait for the revolution is a nonsensical argument. They say collapse leads to extinction, but they have conceded that is the status quo, that this violence and this extinction is already happening to certain bodies who are deemed as pollutants, which is a reason to why there's not a presumption or type of argument or a reason why extinction necessarily matters, because you have not explained the way in which you resolve that extinction. Now, the next argument is that we get trapped in the neoliberal economy. This is where I'm going to go for the permutation. The only answer they really have to the permutation is that there's no perms in a method debate. The only reason we didn't answer this because you said we didn't have a plan text, which we fucking did, so I'm not sure why this argument makes any sense. We said the permutation would be best because I have the Brzezinski and the DSRB solvency benefits. Our affirmative is that material analysis. They have done no material analysis, which means they have not actually met the performative thing. The only thing I have to do now is answer the links. Now, the first link is that we have to look at the entire structure. That was Brzezinski and how spaces are constructed, which means we've already done that material analysis, but you get stuck in the consciousness raising, never actually do the work, which means it cannot be exported to our community space when those structures are inevitable, and they have conceded that frame question. The individualism link is not the affirmative. We argue that focus on the personal is key to held people accountable to not lead to white privilege, but rather we take that individualism to build upon those communities, which is essential to your alternative. Last our argument is the affect focus. This was not really articulated, but we would say affect is inevitable and not answer the three-tier methodology, which directly impact turns that link.
Good debate. Good debate.
In my hands, I can't.
We're not in this room. I think choose this thing.
I think we're in here. No, we're not.
I said no. Like, no.
It's a hot room. No. I'm pretty sure we're in this room. Yeah, we're in this room.
Oh, and this air. It's so hot in here.
It is hot as fuck.
We're in Cottonwood.